The day the walls trembled. Before we step into the shadows of one of the most shocking prison tragedies in modern history, hit subscribe, drop a like, and leave a comment. The more you engage, the more true crime stories I'll bring straight to your screen. Now let's walk into Carandiru. The morning of October 2nd, 1992, began like any other inside Sao Paulo's notorious Carandiru Penitentiary. The same bleak concrete hallways, the same echo of metal doors slamming, the same thick tension that hung in the air like smoke. But by noon, everything had shifted. The guards said the walls felt different, as if the prison itself sensed what was coming. At the center of that tension was a man the inmates simply called Marquez. Not a kingpin, not a gang commander, but a quiet, unreadable figure whose influence reached far beyond his 6-by-8-foot cell. Marquez had been sentenced to more than 2 decades for a bank robbery that spiraled out of control, a crime that put him behind bars. But ironically, it was inside Carandiru that his legend began. He had a reputation for negotiating disputes before they exploded, brokering fragile peace between rival groups, and earning the respect of men who trusted no one. Some inmates said he had a gift. He could read danger before it arrived. And on that morning, he felt danger everywhere. By 11 a.m., 2 rival factions inside Pavilion 9 clashed over something small, a stolen shirt, maybe a radio, maybe nothing at all. Rumors inside Carandiru worked like sparks in dry grass. All anyone knew was that shouts erupted, fists flew, and within minutes, the situation spiraled beyond anyone's control. The guards locked the gates. Sirens wailed. Radios crackled with urgent voices calling for backup. Marquez stood at the threshold of the chaos, his hands raised, shouting over the noise, trying to force both sides to back down. But the momentum was already too strong. Too many tempers. Too much history. Too many unfinished grudges. By noon, the entire pavilion was on edge, and prison administrators made a decision that would later be questioned around the world. They escalated. Fast. Outside the gates, police vehicles began to gather. Tactical units arrived. The kind of response usually reserved for armed standoffs. But this time, the weapons were locked inside a room full of desperate men. Inside the cell block, Marquez pushed through the crowds, trying to keep inmates calm, urging them to sit, breathe, wait. But fear was spreading faster than any voice of reason. One inmate shouted that the police were coming to clean house. Another insisted they would be taken out one by one. Paranoia grew like a rising tide. And then the power flickered. Just once. Lights dimmed. A momentary darkness. Barely a second. But that was all it took. Hundreds of men froze. Marquez felt the air shift. A low rumbling noise. Boots, radios, armored movement crept closer. The prison was preparing for an operation unlike any it had seen before. At 1 p.m., just beyond Pavilion 9, a senior officer conferred with administrators. Their words were quiet, but the tension in their bodies showed everything. The plan was decisive, rapid, overwhelming. Inside, the inmates didn't know what the plan was, only that something catastrophic was approaching. Marquez pressed his back against the cold wall, listening to the thunder of boots closing in. He whispered to the man beside him, "Stay calm. Don't give them a reason." But even he didn't believe it anymore. Because at that moment, the first metal door opened. Heavy, slow, echoing. A sound that silenced the entire pavilion. And then came something no inmate expected. A strange, muffled message over the prison PA system. One that Marquez couldn't fully make out, except for the last 3 words. Prepare for entry. Everything inside him went cold. Because that phrase could only mean one thing. An operation was coming. A major one. And there was no guarantee anyone inside Pavilion 9 would walk out safely. Marquez turned to the men around him. "We don't move," he said, "no matter what happens." But just as the fear settled in, a sharp noise cut through the silence. Not from outside. From within the pavilion. Someone had opened a door that was supposed to stay locked. And when the inmates turned toward it, they saw a figure standing there, one no one expected, holding something that would change the entire course of that day. The man in the doorway. For a long moment, no one in Pavilion 9 breathed. The figure in the doorway wasn't a guard, wasn't an administrator, wasn't anyone who belonged on the secured side of that entrance. It was Silvio Andrade, an inmate known for keeping to himself, a wiry man with restless eyes who rarely spoke more than a sentence. But what froze the entire room wasn't him. It was the radio he held. A guard's radio. Cracked. Blood on the edge of the antenna. The kind of object that could flip an already fragile situation into disaster. Silvio looked terrified. Not aggressive, not triumphant, terrified. His voice trembled as he held the radio up. "They're coming," he said. "They're already inside the lower block. I heard them talking. They think we're armed. They think we're preparing an attack." A wave of panic swept through the pavilion. Men shouted, pushed, scrambled for corners, unsure whether to hide or fight. Fear doesn't move in a straight line. It bounces, ricochets, multiplies. Marquez stepped forward, hands raised, trying to calm the chaos. "Silvio," he said steadily, "where did you get that radio?" Silvio shook his head. "I found it. One of the guards dropped it when they ran. They were evacuating the wing." The radio crackled to life, filling the room with a burst of static. Then a distant voice came through, stern, clipped, commanding. "Team 3 in position. Await the order." Silvio panicked and dropped the radio. It hit the concrete with a sharp clack that felt like a gunshot. Several inmates dove for cover. Others pressed against the walls. Marquez felt the situation slipping like sand through his fingers. He knew Carandiru. He knew how the administration operated. And he knew that once a tactical unit entered a pavilion, the chance of reason disappeared. He had survived 8 years in this place, not because he was the strongest, but because he understood people. Every inmate had a pressure point. Every guard had a threshold. And what was happening now was different. Too tense. Too sudden. Too unpredictable. The faint rumble of boots drew closer. A man named Batista, big, loud, impulsive, yelled from the back, "We need something to protect ourselves. They're coming in ready for war." "No," Marquez snapped. "That's exactly what will get us all hurt. No weapons. No threats. We stay together. We stay visible." But Batista wasn't listening. Fear was louder than reason. He pushed through the crowd and grabbed Silvio's discarded radio. "If they want to fight, maybe we should tell them we're not afraid." Marquez lunged and grabbed Batista's wrist. "You don't understand. If you say one wrong word." A sudden burst of static erupted again. Then, orders confirmed. Prepare to enter Pavilion 9. Every man in the room froze. The operation had been greenlit. Silvio backed into the wall, trembling. "They think we're armed because of the radio, because of me." Marquez grabbed his shoulders. "This isn't your fault. But right now we need to stay calm." The lights flickered again, and then the first flash of movement appeared behind the reinforced gate. Shadows of helmets, shields, armored vests. The tactical unit was seconds away. A low, steady hum filled the corridor outside. Radios, shields, boots. The heavy breathing of men preparing for a high-risk entry. Marquez scanned the faces around him. Fear, despair, anger, disbelief. These were men who had grown up with danger, lived with danger, caused danger. And yet at this moment, every single one looked like a child staring at a tidal wave. "Everyone on the ground," Marquez ordered. "Hands visible. Stay still." Some obeyed. Some hesitated. Some panicked and tried to climb the walls for hiding spots that didn't exist. The gate latch snapped open with a metallic echo that rang across the entire pavilion. A hush fell. Seconds stretched. Breaths held. Hearts racing. And then just as the tactical unit prepared to breach, a voice came from the corridor, shouting urgently. "Stop. Hold the line. We found something." It wasn't a guard. It wasn't an officer. It was someone from the medical wing, sprinting, gasping, panic in his voice. The tactical commander barked back, "What is it?" The medic held up a small folder. "It's about one of the inmates in Pavilion 9, something you need to see before you go in." And when he handed the folder to the commander, Marquez saw the expression on the officer's face change. Confusion. Shock. Recognition. As if the information inside that folder completely rewrote what they thought they knew. The commander looked straight toward Pavilion 9. At Marquez. At the men behind him. And then he said something that rippled through the entire prison. Why wasn't this brought to us earlier? This changes everything. The file that stopped the bullets. For a few breaths, Pavilion 9 hovered between life and catastrophe. The tactical unit waited in rigid formation, shields up, eyes fixed on the prisoners. The inmates knelt or crouched in terrified silence. And at the center of it all stood the commander, holding the thin medical file that had just altered the course of the day. Marquez didn't move. Even his heartbeat felt suspended. The commander flipped through the pages again, jaw tightening. Finally, he stepped forward. "Ricardo Marquez," he said, voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Stand up." A murmur cut through the inmates. Marquez rose slowly, hands visible. "You've been identified as a nonviolent inmate assigned to mediator training," the commander continued. "Your behavioral file was supposed to be logged with Central Command this morning." Marquez swallowed. Of course. The new mediation program Carandiru had been testing. He had been volunteered by the warden weeks earlier. A program meant to reduce conflict, not inflame it. But the paperwork. It must never have been submitted. That omission had nearly cost the entire pavilion their lives. The medic who had delivered the file spoke up, panting. "He's part of a conflict resolution pilot. He was trained to de-escalate situations. They didn't want him mixed up in a riot." A harsh irony. He was the one trying the hardest to calm everything. Yet without that file, the tactical unit had treated Pavilion 9 as hostile. The commander scanned the room. "We were told there were armed inmates. That a guard had been attacked. That the pavilion was preparing an ambush." Silvio's shaking voice rose from the floor. We didn't. "I found the radio, sir. I shouldn't have touched it." The commander exhaled sharply. That radio belonged to a guard who slipped on the stairs evacuating the lower ward. No attack. No ambush. Just chaos and bad communication. The words hit the pavilion like cold rain. No attack. No weapons. Just misunderstanding multiplied by fear. Marquez looked at the ground. A single mistake could have turned that misunderstanding into a tragedy. "Sir," Marquez said, "we're not looking for trouble. No one wants to fight. We just didn't know what was happening." The commander nodded once, slowly. Because someone didn't file the proper report. He didn't have to raise his voice for the accusation to sink like lead. The tension in the room didn't vanish, but it shifted. The tactical unit lowered their shields slightly. A few inmates began to breathe again. Then the commander said something no one expected. "We're clearing this pavilion, but the investigation begins now. Someone higher up tried to push this situation past the point of reason, and I intend to find out who." The inmates exchanged looks. Someone higher up. Someone who wanted this unit deployed at full force without hesitation. What for? Why escalate a conflict that could have been controlled? As guards began escorting small groups out for processing, Marquez felt a hand grip his arm. It was the medic. "Marquez," the medic whispered, "there's something else, something in the file I didn't say out loud." Marquez frowned. "What?" The medic opened the folder to the last page. A printed email sent the night before. A note from an administrator stating, "If violence breaks out, prioritize isolating inmate Ricardo Marquez. His presence may become inconvenient to ongoing restructuring plans." Marquez felt his throat tighten. He wasn't caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. He'd been targeted. Why would someone write that? Marquez whispered. The medic shook his head. "I don't know. But someone wanted today to go differently. Maybe they wanted to pin something on you. Maybe they wanted you out of the way." As the tactical unit withdrew and Pavilion 9 was secured, Marquez stared at the corridor where the commander disappeared. A long shadow stretched across the floor, cold and heavy. He understood now. This wasn't just panic. Wasn't just bad communication. Someone had been planning a narrative. One where he wouldn't walk out alive. Someone with influence inside Carandiru. And as he was escorted to temporary holding, he realized this truth. The real danger wasn't the riot. It wasn't the tactical unit. It wasn't even a prison. It was whoever had written that message in the file, a ghost with authority, a name not yet revealed, a ghost who wasn't finished with him. And as Marquez was led down the dim hallway, a guard whispered quietly, almost regretfully, "You didn't hear this from me, but another pavilion just reported a disturbance. And guess what? Your name came up again." Marquez froze. His story wasn't ending. It was beginning. And for the first time, he understood the weight of the truth. Some legends in prison aren't born from violence, but from surviving the people who never wanted you to leave alive. If this story shook you, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe before the next file surfaces.